Hi, everybody, and welcome to tonight's podcast. I'm sure there's a few people in the world that may have forgot we actually existed because it's been a long time since we've had a steady schedule. But one thing I do want to let people know, we haven't gone away, and if people know, they know what I mean. But I'm delighted to be joined by, first of all, Tony. How you doing, buddy?
All good, mate. All good. Another good result at the weekend, which I'm looking forward to look at, kind of discussing. Obviously, big match tomorrow night as well. But yeah, all good. More or less organised with the crumble shopping as well. So yeah, we're on schedule at the moment.
Speaking of, I went to the Christmas market in Belfast, mate, and talk about charging you an arm and a leg for. I mean, I think my oldest, she got like a hot dog, right? And it's not in German ones, and because it's in the market, it was like 12 quid, and you're like, come on. It's just basic things that just overcharge for these things because it's Christmas time. And I look upon it if we get snow and it's all nice and picturesque, but it's fucking shite in Belfast. It's pissing rain and there's wind everywhere, so it's not really the most amazing setting. But Gav, how about you? It's been a long time, buddy. You're sporting the Real Madrid top tonight. Have you been up to much recently?
I know, a European special. Well, funnily enough, talking about Christmas markets, I went to the neighbouring kind of town, Straven, and we had reindeers on show. So we had our daughter looking at reindeers. She didn't really know what to make of them. Quite nice looking creatures, but it's just kind of funny seeing them in Scotland. But aye, all good, mate, all good. In terms of like prepared for Christmas, not really. I do things very, very last minute. I don't think it's good for the blood pressure whenever you're like trying to make your way through shopping malls, and like the last days before Christmas. But that's just what I do. That's how I roll. Aye. And how about you, mate? Are you good? Apart from the German first.
Apart from the what?
The German bratwurst.
Oh yeah, the hot dog thing. But no, I'm good, mate. As I said there at the start, we're struggling for a schedule at the moment, but hopefully when we get past Christmas, we'll be fully flying again. I've already explained this. There's a lot of things going on, personal stuff and that, but we're still fully together as a podcast, so no issues in that front. Great to have everyone along with us tonight. Paul McFarlane, good evening, Stephen, Anthony, and Gavin. Hope you're all well. Same to yourself, buddy. P. McLaughlin, Smell Glove, Thomas Burns, Christoph as well. So glad to have you with us on this Monday evening. But first of all, Tony, we'll start what we always do. And years gone by, a wee brief summary of the game against Hibs at the weekend. Were you there?
I was there, yes. Me and Jude were there at the weekend, and we needed to get back to the car to thaw out a wee bit. By the end of it, it was absolutely freezing, especially in the second half. But no, we were there. So because it was Father and Sunday out, it wasn't the usual, few bevies pre and post match. It was a McDonald's and a walk around the superstore, looking at all the stuff for the advert. But it was a really good day, and it's one of the games. I was a bit tetchy before it because you would see a lot of guys handing up with their holding up 4 or 5 spare tickets and whatnot, and it is obviously the kind of Christmas shopping weekend, and you just didn't especially with the fact we were playing first, you wanted to no give them any hope and try and just kind of get on with it as best you can. But no, by the time the teams came out, the ground was full and everybody was in good voice, and obviously it was a bit of a tetchy start. Hibs came, they had a couple of good balls through the middle, which we were struggling to deal with. We didn't really deal with them too great the full game, to be honest, but it's not too bad when you've got a top-class keeper like Kasper Schmeichel keeping it out. And then, we ended up getting some goals up the other side, and obviously the pick of the bunch was the final one from Kyogo. But yeah, if you'd have told me beforehand 3-0 against Hibs and just keeps the wins ticking over, would absolutely have taken it. Wasn't our most swashbuckling best, but sometimes you don't need to be. It's that time of the season where it's a bit of a slog, and it's just about getting those points on the board, and hopefully you'll have better days to come the springtime.
100%. Getting the 3 points any way possible is the most important thing, as you said, to keep the momentum going, keep our lead at the top of the table, and Gav, some media outlets and pundits will have you believe again that a certain team in Glasgow is coming back and they're back on form and everyone should be worried, blah, blah, blah. But as Tony said, there's just vitally important we keep our consistency levels up And yeah, some games are going to be won ugly. I mean, a 3-0 win, we're talking about it being won in an ugly manner, but we'll come on to the defensive errors straight after this. But what did you think in terms of a brief summary of the game, the atmosphere, the crowd, that type of thing?
In terms of the actual performance, we weren't at our best. I felt that we were kind of playing within ourselves at times, and Hibs had undoubted pace up front, and that was the game plan to exploit it. I thought they set up well. I couldn't tell if they were playing 4-5-1. It felt like that. They always had an extra man, at least one extra man in the midfield, and they were just like coiled, just waiting to let thread through that killer pass. And they did a number of occasions. It's whenever you come away from a 3-0 home win, and if you haven't watched the game, you would imagine that that's just your standard Celtic victory at Parkhead. But whenever you see that Kasper Schmeichel has been given man of the match, it does kind of tell a different story. He really stood up today. I think the previous game at Parkhead, the previous domestic game at Parkhead, he could have played with the slippers on. But this was just that type of game where Hibs had a different dynamic to them, where they had that game plan to counter-attack with pace. And we didn't do ourselves any favours. I'm not looking for scapegoats. There were people who made individual mistakes at certain times. But I think overall the defence maybe got caught sleeping on a couple of occasions. But Schmeichel stood up. That's what he's paid for. Other games, he has very, very quiet games. But today he showed why he is, a very, very top quality keeper in terms of Celtic standards. So overall, delighted with the 3 points, and we move on to the next game.
Yeah, we move on to Pastors New. And I'm assuming when you say today, you mean Saturday. Celtic haven't played today, but I know. It's the first time I've been on the while. There's going to be teaming issues, you know what I mean? We'll get through it. But Tony, and I know the Monday Club in previous times has been known as a bit of a moan fest. People like to air their grievances, vent a wee bit, McGinty, yourself, Franny, Jed, whoever's on it at that time. And we'll start with, could you say, the negatives? We'll just throw them in to start with, and then we'll come on to the positives, the goals, etc. But Gav's right. There was a few moments of defensive kind of lapses and concentration. The first couple of minutes, is it Kukurage? I think so. I think that's how you pronounce the big fella's name. He was through. Kasper Schmeichel kind of stayed big and waited on him hitting the shot and saved it with his feet. Then they were getting corner and corner after corner for a bit. It's like the first maybe 3 or 4 minutes they were on top. And like what Gav said, there was a few players who made individual mistakes and errors, and you even referenced as well. We kind of struggled to, I wouldn't say contain, but to kind of fight against that long ball type through ball for the pace of Eli Yuhan or Kukurage and Taiwan off and people like that. But was that a concern for you? I mean, it was Scales and it was Trusty were the centre backs and Johnson and Taylor. Is that a concern? Does that show you that Carter Vickers is really, really important to the team?
Yeah, he absolutely, mate, without question. He is one of the main focal points of the team. We've talked on numerous shows about how there's very few players in this team that you would say are an automatic pick. But Carter Vickers is definitely one of them, and you definitely notice his presence, when he's not there. But yeah, I mean, I suppose it's never good. But I think it was the fact that it happened quite a bit, especially in the first half, and was some, to use the kind of tennis phrase, unforced errors. I think there was a sloppy back pass just when I think it was not long after we'd made it 2-0, and Kasper Schmeichel had a good couple of saves at that point as well, and it's just that I think, and kind of Brendan alluded to it in the post-match conference about the sort of kind of defend as one. It's not just the back four, but he felt the press wasn't really at it, especially in the first half. And when that happens, Hibs, despite all their how they've not been so great this season in terms of results, and I actually think they're still bottom, but they actually, that they are actually a no bad team, and they can exploit those spaces, and they did. And like you say, a more clinical team, we would have been in a lot of trouble at that point. But thankfully, we rode that particular storm. But yeah, it's not something you like to see, especially when you're in that period in the season when it is just about getting results. As I say, you're never going to win every game by 5 and 6, but there was definitely, against a more clinical team, we could have been made to pay for it. But as I say, I think it was one of those games. I think it was Smell the Glove kind of alluded to it in the background there. He says it felt like one of those games that you just wanted out the way. And as I say, as much as we weren't at our best, thankfully we weren't punished for it. But it's definitely not what you want to see too much of going forward.
Yeah, and to me, it concerned me a wee bit. It happened too often, Gavin, for it to be a one-off or, a couple of times in the game. I thought that, like you said, that was Hibs. Their game plan down to a T was to rely on that counter-attack. And, I mean, the majority of the time, they go through the press and they were attacking our back four and sometimes getting past them. And like what Tony said, if you're in European football, that's a major, major issue. And I know Rodgers was kind of, at full time, he was raging about the press and the kind of trying to contain Hibs as a team. We weren't really at it from the start to finish, really. Obviously, we got 3 goals, which we'll come on to. But did that particular part of the game concern yourself, seeing that time and time again?
Yeah, it does. Especially whenever we're rotating the squad, if you want to use that phrase. Scales coming in, Luke McKibben coming in, Greg Taylor and Valle, that kind of carousel at the left back. And those players were culpable for certain individual errors. Taylor, at the very, very start of the game, he was quite deep, advanced in the opposition half, and he was receiving a ball from Liam Scales. And he meant to take it in half turn, but the ball kind of went under his foot. And there was no pressure around him, but a Hibs player managed to get the possession. He saw his striker just making a run, and he hit a brilliant first-time pass to tee him up. Scales at one point overcommitted near the halfway line, where he never had to. There was no necessity for that. And that created another really, really dangerous counter-attack. And Luke McKibben in the second half, where you thought maybe we kind of, ironed out those mistakes, he makes a really bad back pass, which I didn't think he was capable of. And these players are players that we have trusted in the past. And just whenever you're going into a big game at midweek, you wonder, where are these mistakes coming from? You can't always expect perfection. But whenever you had, Hibs could have scored 3 in the first half, and they could have at least got another one in the second half. Just a wee bit strange, but consistency is a difficult thing to maintain week in, week out, especially whenever you're playing 2 games per week. But it happened, and we had a keeper to kind of cover the mistakes. Yeah, not typical, not what you want to see, and Rodgers is right to go through them if need be, but they'll learn from that. I bet you Luke McKibben will never ever make that mistake again. So it is what it is, but I'm not going to go mental about it.
You could tell straight away the instant regret. It was like the blood drained from his face when the camera, while I was watching, panned back to him. But just a quick one. I'll come straight back to you, Gav. Right, you mentioned Greg Taylor. Look, I'm not, obviously, it's not going to be a bashing Greg Taylor segment here, but I just want to get both your opinions in this, right? We know he plays the introverted fullback role really well, but what do you make of him, like, appearing on the right-hand side, basically right wing position, coming right over with the play? And for me, look, I get that, I understand that if it's a tactical part of his game, but that left back position is always open for the counter attack. And we're speaking about this at the start of the podcast, and I was watching the game and I was just thinking back. I was like, the amount of times I've seen Gregory just at the right hand side or just slightly to the right instead of being over his natural kind of left sided position, coming in a wee bit like he's used to. But now it seems to be he's joining all the attacks. He's in the middle of the box. He's everywhere. Do you think that's a tactical choice, or do you think he's been a wee bit irresponsible with his positioning?
No, I'll defend him here. I think that the manager gives him license to do that because he knows Greg Taylor's strengths going forward and picking those passes. The one against Aberdeen was really delightful. We wouldn't, if he never executed that pass, we wouldn't have won the game. So I think that the manager allows him to do that. The manager is also aware of the disadvantage of allowing your left back to kind of play in almost in the whole position, because it leaves yourself exposed. However, he probably understands that in the league anyway, domestically, you're allowed to make those kind of you're allowed to gamble. I'm not saying cocky, but you're allowed to gamble and make those kind of tactical decisions to push a defender up there, to capitalise, to create more men up there. He knows if there's a killer ball, it might expose us, kind of like what it did with Hibs at the weekend. But I think on the whole, knowing our opposition, he trusts Greg Taylor. And I guess the other thing I would say is Greg Taylor, like you said, we're not bashing Greg Taylor, but he does take a lot of criticism. I actually think it's a really good thing about his mental strength. The fact that he doesn't go into his shell whenever he does come on. He came on as a substitute. Well, let's remember that. He wasn't favoured in that game. He came on as a substitute and he actually has the confidence to take up those positions. If you're a man playing with no confidence, then you'll stay in your shell. You'll stay back in the left back position. You won't expose yourself by going up like that, trying to join the attack. So I think we should give him a compliment. The fact that he actually had the goal to do that, go up there and get involved in the attack and actually assist in the goal. So well done to Greg Taylor in that one.
Mm-hmm. Aye, yeah. His assist for Rio in the Punditry game was a sublime bit of play. But Tony, obviously there's different opinions here. Your man comes in, Faye must play. Greg Taylor has been rotten in Europe. Rio needs to start as well. We call ourselves a big team, and while away from home tomorrow, we need a win. But just to focus primarily on what he said about Alex Faye and Greg Taylor, I think Gav mentioned that at the start of the podcast. It's like a merry-go-round in terms of who plays at the moment, who's favoured in that position. And we all know how good Greg Taylor is coming in introverted and stuff like that. I just thought it was quite interesting to see the number of times the left-hand side was exposed. I don't know what it looks like at the stadium. I'm only going by what I see in the TV cameras and things like that. I mean, at the stadium, do you notice it? Do you notice the left-back position always being void? Do you notice the teams always attacking that? Like, do you think do you think Gregory can keep doing that, especially in European football?
I think probably in Europe he'll get asked to be a bit more disciplined with it, to be honest, mate. But you could have probably argued as well that, as I say, one thing you would say about Brendan Rodgers is if any player, whether that be a squad player or a Carter Vickers or a Callum McGregor, if they're not doing specifically what they've been asked to do, they do get berated on the touchline. I mean, I've seen them go have a proper humdinger with pretty much everybody at some point over his time at Celtic, and get really get on their back if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I've never seen him at any point do that with Greg Taylor when he's in those positions domestically. So as Gav says, there's clearly a license there to do that. Perhaps it's maybe the old school. You talk about there's a lot of chat about when it was like kind of Roy Keane, Paul Scholes. It used to be if one went forward, the other stayed back. You could maybe argue that perhaps Scales or Trusty, well, it would have been Scales on that game, but perhaps they could have covered the area a little bit better if they were seeing that Gregory was kind of was making those runs forward. Perhaps a wee bit more discipline at the back in terms of, right, well, if he's going forward, we'll stay back and we'll help cover. But yeah, I would say in European football, I don't think he'll get that same kind of that kind of license is the best word to do, or permission to do those kind of runs as often as he does domestically. But most of the time, we should be able to accommodate that, especially at home in a league game.
Yeah, he definitely seems to be way deep in attacks at the moment, even more so than he was under Postecoglou. It's just interesting from a tactical sense to see that. And we'll move on, Gav, to one of the positive things. We'll come on to the first goal. His fullback on the other side, Alistair Johnson, provided an assist for Arnie Engels to get his third goal of the season. Good to see him break the lines, get into the box, make that kind of last man run, so to speak, that Matt O'Reilly did so well. And then I see on Twitter later that day the celebration. Police are out in force because he didn't go nuts and he wasn't smiling from ear to ear. And I've seen a few people said he looks depressed and he doesn't look happy. And maybe that's just his demeanour. We don't know that. I mean, look at Odds and Edwards, scored all sorts of goals, probably only celebrated one of them when he was smiling. So, you don't know people's demeanours. But Arnie Engels, third goal of the season. Can we see him kick on from here? What do you think his best position is, Gav?
Well, if you're talking about the number 6, number 8, number 10, I don't know. I'm not overly concerned, but I trust Brendan Rodgers to play him when he should be playing, and bench him when he should be benched. We've got 5 very good centre midfielders right now, and I think they should all be given time. I don't think any of them is a liability, and we should just be mindful of how many games have played, be mindful of the opposition. I get the politics, and I think it is politics whenever you buy a player for £11 million. You would like to think that he's going to be given game time, even if he doesn't set the heather on fire straight away. So I don't have qualms with him being played quite a lot. However, he's still a young player. What is he, 20 years old, 21 years old? But there will be times when he should be benched as well and utilise the squad. In terms of his best position, I don't honestly know. I think he needs to find out for himself, and maybe the coaches as well need to kind of guide him in that way. We're only going to find it out once he gains confidence and he starts playing a wee bit more fluidly, expressing himself. Whenever he does that, then we can see what his true strengths are. He's still a really young man, as I've said, and we don't know his full potential. So I know that sounds like a crap answer. I'm not trying to kind of sit in the fence right now, but I don't know. He's a midfielder. He's got a bit of physicality about him. He's going to get better and better and better. But I think under the guidance of Brendan Rodgers, that can only be a good thing. And sorry, it sounds like I'm waffling here, but I just think by the end of the season, we'll know more about this player. But we've got a player in our hands. We don't know exactly what his ceiling will be, but maybe by the start of next season, he'll start really expressing himself. I wouldn't want to put too much pressure on him. But the good thing is, whenever he's not performing as best as what we can hope for, as I said, we've got McCowan and we've got Bernardo, who are 2 excellent midfielders right now. In general, see, whenever you think about, without kind of transgressing, see, whenever you think about going back a few seasons when like the midfielder to bring on from the bench was Turnbull, I just think the strength and depth for midfield right now is so much better. I think everybody's got the right attitude, they've got ability, they work for the team, they've got mobility as well. I just think the midfield looks really, really good, and I'm not too bothered who plays in any particular game.
Yeah, no, again, it's a good rotation, as Rodgers calls it, to have in that the midfield positions. And for me, Tony, with Arnie Engels himself, look, we know we have a player there, right? He was playing in the Bundesliga. He had over nearly 100 appearances at a young age. He's a fully fledged Belgium international now since he's joined us, 2 or 3 caps, I believe. And that's all pointing in the right direction. I think what Gav says is spot on. His confidence levels for me aren't high right now. What I've noticed, I don't know about you probably see him more in the flesh, obviously at Celtic Park all the time. But when he receives the ball, sometimes he just plays the easy pass. Sometimes he looks for the easy way out, and he doesn't really adventure forward that much. He doesn't really show for the ball, in my opinion, an awful lot. But I do believe that, and look, there's potential within him. I think he's going to be unbelievable once he gets his feet under the table. And I think Rodgers is right to reference Kuhn and Bernardo in a recent interview he done, that the people were writing them off. I mean, I done that with Kuhn, and I think a few of us done it with Bernardo as well. So people can prove you wrong over a period of time. Obviously, the transfer fee's always going to be in people's minds, what we paid for him. And I kind of want to put this to you as well. You're mad with another good point. Engels is a 6. 1 games with Augsburg against Dortmund and Bayern with him as a 6. Been saying for a week, swap him and Cal, and we'll see the best of him. Do you think that could be an option? Or for me, Kalmax, obviously, he's the pace setter within the team. He's the playmaker, the number 6, the quarterback, as people reference him. Could you afford to try that for a few weeks to see if Engels can settle in there? Or do you think it's like what Gav said, just find his best position over the course of the next 12 or so months and take it from there?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an option. I just don't think it's an option that Brendan himself will utilise too often. I think it'll be more a mix of him, Bernardo and McCowan, and Rio as well, of course, sort of mixing things. There's, Callum McGregor's been so influential this season from that position. You only have to look at his goal contributions, if nothing else. But yeah, I think it's just the case of, he's a young lad. He's came in with the obviously the expectation that he's going to be under and yes every week in terms of some supporters purely on the basis that we spent 11 million on him. And he came in the door just as him and Matt O'Reilly were like passing ships in the night. But we sold Matt O'Reilly for £30 million, and I said this last week. People have got to realise that Matt O'Reilly didn't arrive at Celtic as a £30 million player. It's and he wasn't an automatic pick in the team every week either. But he steadily, he grew, and obviously under Postecoglou and then latterly under Brendan. And you're bang on, mate. To Nicholas Kuhn is the perfect example, because a lot of the criticisms that Engels is getting now, you could just swap the names and it's the exact same thing. Kuhn was, wasn't looking for the ball. He wasn't playing he wasn't taking players on. He looked a shadow of what he is now. And subsequently we found out not only was that a new player adjusting, but he had some underlying things as well. I've seen enough of Arne Engels so far to see that we've got a right good player here. But as I say, when you're 20, 21 at that level, you're going to have weekends where you look absolutely sensational, and then there's going to be other games where you don't have as much an impact on the game as other times. Very similar, you could argue, to Matt O'Reilly when he first came into Celtic. There was games, not just under Postecoglou, but even the kind of, you would say maybe the early part under Brendan's return as well, where you were thinking he's just not hitting heights, and then just something clicked, and then he absolutely was flying from the kind of October onwards. But yeah, as I say, he's going to have good games and not so good games. And I think we probably have to, and then that's the thing, no one really gets a settling in period at Celtic. It's got to be, you're in the team and they demand instant success. What I mean by that is I think you will get the best of him once he's had, been here for at least a season, but then when he gets a proper pre-season working with Brendan Rodgers, you'll see an even better player next season. But I think he's not going to be in the team every week at the moment. There will be a lot of rotation, particularly with Paulo Bernardo as well. So it's kind of at that point in the year where we're playing the fixture rather than anything about, form or anything like that. It might well be the case, the next derby's at Ibrox. It might well be the case that he goes with Bernardo and McGregor that day for a bit more physicality. But if the game was at Celtic Park, it wouldn't surprise me if Engels was to start. It's just the way our midfield is so packed with talent now that you've got 5 guys vying for 3 positions. There's always going to be one player missing out, but that's not to say that they're dropped. For example, it's more that they're rotated. It might well come a point where he's so good that he can't be dropped out the team, but I don't think any of them, to be honest, have hit that particular height so far. So yeah, this rotation game will continue for some time yet.
Yeah, especially with the heavy fixture schedule we'll have come up as well. I think one of the points that we're talking about Kuhn, and obviously Arne Engels not finding that kind of consistent pattern of form. I mean, one of the big calls Rodgers made against Hibs there was taking Kuhn off at half time because he wasn't making an impact, and he brought Forrest on to take care of the ball. So look, he makes the big calls, and Arne Engels stayed on as well, which is good for his confidence. But Gav, coming on not long after that, I think Luke McKeown hit the bar. But like fast forward to the second goal was a set piece, and it does look like the Celtic are practicing set pieces. Looks like we're having different systems for different phases of the play. Short for the quick shot, or the front post one where Alameda kind of runs onto it, like Chris Sutton-esque. That's the best person I've ever seen do front post headers was Chris Sutton. When he played for Celtic, he was incredible at them. But Alameda's winning his fair share of flick-ons. I think it was crossed in by, was it Engels? It would have been Engels, wouldn't it? He crossed it in, flicked on by Alameda. Joe Newell, wrong place, wrong time.
Was it not Luke McKeown who took that free kick?
Was it the other side? It was Luke McKeown. Aye. Luke McKeown then whipped it in. Alameda wins the flick on. Joe Newell, well, he done a Carter Vickers and put the ball in the back of his own net. But I thought it was quite interesting. In the post-match, Rodgers was talking about the set pieces, and he said that Gavin Strachan and Greg Wallace. No idea who this guy is. Hope it's not the fella from the BBC. But they're taking pride in the routines and pride in the set pieces, how to do it at the moment. And it's just good to hear that, because time after time we were just no hoping crosses into the box from set pieces, not really getting anywhere. And I think we've scored a fair few headers this season. Scales and stuff come to mind.
See, ironically, just before we hit that corner kick, I was about to nudge the guy next to me at Parkhead and say we could have a dozen of these and we will only score for them. I feel that I heard a stat a while ago, and it was like 40% of goals come from set pieces. I don't know if that stat's changed, because that was a number of years ago, and I don't know, maybe the game has developed since then. I just think that Celtic are not efficient at set pieces. I think that a lot of the times with a corner, we'll take a short corner and we'll try and work it around that way. The funny thing is a lot of the times it's going to lead to a cross into the box, and you're not just better taking a direct corner from that. I don't think we're the biggest team in the world, but whenever you've got Trusty and you've got Scales, I think Scales is the best header of a ball in the opposition box for us. But like Trusty, Vickers, Scales, Ida as well, you've got a chance. I just think that for whatever reason, maybe it's the fact that a lot of the opposition domestically are big physical teams. I think that's definitely an admission. I don't think that we're brilliant at set pieces. I heard, did any of you guys hear in the English media that somebody had labelled Arsenal as the new Stoke, which was like a lot of their goals are coming from set pieces, and they're very, very dynamic, innovative with their set pieces. And I think it was a good compliment. And I think it is to kind of diversify your attack, not always like Arsenal once upon a time were guilty of passing it into the net, and now they're guilty of being Stoke City and how good they are with set pieces. I would like to see Celtic get better at that, but yes, whenever we do score from a set piece, from a corner, like at the weekend, it's refreshing to see. I wish we could do more of it. Yeah, so, brilliant.
It's not like Gav to totally shit over what I said, isn't it? What do you think about them new set piece coaches? They're shite. No, we can't do anything with them. No, but Tony, by the way, Gav, I do agree. Me and my granddad often sit beside each other and say we're never scored from set pieces. So, it's a common thing, I think, among Celtic supporters as well. And even Sam Frank came in there, Tony, was talking about Trusty hit the bar from the corner kick. It is good to see. I mean, headers are cracking goals to see. Scales has got one or a couple this season, and I totally agree. I think he is the best header we have of the ball in terms of coming up for corner kicks and things like that. But just thought it was just refreshing. Alameda winning the flick on and a goal coming from it.
Absolutely. I mean, the running joke used to be when the Martin O'Neill years used to be like a corner kick was like very near like a penalty. We scored from them so often. We just used to bully defenders in their own box from set plays. But then I remember, but even in Brendan's first term, but then through the Ange era as well, it used to be if we got a corner, you'd go and stick the kettle on because you knew you weren't going to miss anything. But it seems to be this season, particularly, that we do seem to have improved. Obviously, you look at the some of the goals we've already scored this season have came from a set play, and fingers crossed that continues. And it's funny, is obviously you guys bring up Arsenal there, but they've got. I heard that I never quite caught it on Saturday what they were meaning, but when I heard the Arsenal fans singing it yesterday as well, I said, that must have been what they were doing. But Arsenal have scored a lot of goals for set plays this year, and their fans are singing set piece again, ole ole. But I heard a few boys singing that on Saturday, but I wasn't quite picking up what they were meaning. But obviously, get it now. But yeah, I would love to see the day where that becomes a common phenomenon at Celtic Park, because it obviously means we're doing the business for free kicks or corners. But it's definitely an area of game where we've not been great in the last few years, and it's frustratingly so, because it's not like we've been. I think the last time we had a particularly decent season on it was when Lennon was manager in his second term, probably purely because of the impact of Christopher Julian at the back, and because he was so tall, he always used to win a lot of headers in the air. You think of the one against Lazio, in particular, but it's not been one of our strong points for too long now, mate. So fingers crossed. Again, that's another thing that's going in the right direction.
Can I ask a wee question to yourself, Stephen? See, from that comment from P. O'Neill, throw-ins are worse. It made me think about Celtic throw-ins and something I heard in the Open Goal podcast. It was over a month ago. It's whenever they had Aidan McGeady and Charlie Mulgrew on at the same time, and they were talking about throw-ins. Now, for Celtic under Brendan and I think under Ange as well, whenever we got a throw-in, even if it was deep into the opposition half, our main thing would be, our main kind of intention would be whenever you take the throw-in, keep possession and just recycle it back, even if it means you eventually pass it back to your centre-back deep in your own half. It's all about keeping possession. And I think that's what Celtic generally do for throw-ins, regardless of where the throw-in is won. However, Aidan McGeady and Charlie Mulgrew were in agreement that if you've managed to gain a throw-in deep into the opposition territory, why would you end up ceding that territory that you've gained? Why not keep going forward? And you know, if you've managed to get that far on, why would you risk bringing it back to your defender? Keep going forward. I don't know if, like, obviously Aidan McGeady is like the sporting director for Ayr United. Charlie Mulgrew is like an up and coming coach who wants to gain experience into like the senior management. So I don't know if they're talking about practicality and just being a pragmatic manager at any particular level. Maybe whenever you get to a particular playing style, such as with Celtic, then there's a greater onus on retaining possession. So I don't know if this is a garbled question, but if you manage to gain a throw-in deep in the opposition half, do you have any qualms about just maintaining possession, even if it comes back to your centre-back, or do you want to kind of go for the jugular? For example, I think the Huns, whenever they've got it, certainly against us, they kind of go for the jugular, hammer thrower. But is it always hammer thrower football? By if you've got a shy, just kind of cause some damage? Where do you stand on it?
I mean, for me, it's twofold, really. If you're chasing the game, I would go for the jugular and get everyone in the box and throw it long. I'm more leaning towards the side of keeping possession, because if you're going for the jugular each time, then it turns into percentage football, and probably 50-50 all the time. You could lose it and get countered on, where if you keep it, you pass it back to their centre-backs, you recycle the ball, you're starting a new phase of attacking. Again, it comes down to the speed. The Celtic players are always receiving the ball from the ball boys really quickly, so the ball's back in play like it hasn't gone out. So it's effectively keeping that attack going from the same position they were in. Funny enough, the only time I've ever seen us kind of play that territory football was, I think, was it at Ibrox, and Lenny was manager, and we kicked it way in for a throw-in near their corner flag. That's the only time.
Yeah,
from the kickoff,
the ball, and Edward put it like right in the corner.
Yeah,
it was actually, if you'd watched it in the Six Nations, you'd think it would be a tremendous kick into, to get a territory advantage. It was, but just so happens we were playing football, but we beat them at that and all, so it's all good.
Yeah, and that's the only really time I've seen that being in action. But it seems to be from when Ange took over, this kind of quick retention of the ball. I mean, Kasper Schmeichel still does it. He gets the ball back and play really quickly. And I wouldn't call it hammer throwing. I know what you're saying, Gav, throwing it into the box all the time. Could it be that because you're just hoping that something falls for you each time? But if we're chasing the game, I would be more inclined to do that. But while we dominate most games of Scottish football, I like to keep the ball and start new phases of play and new phases of attack and different angles of approach. And maybe that sounds like a really nerdy answer, but that's the way I look at football. Just keep the ball. And one of the phrases I used to love Roger saying in his first spell was Celtic rest when we have the ball. I think that's a fantastic phrase. And instead of us chasing it or fighting for it, if we have it, then no need to do that. We can cause the opposition problems. But where do you stand on it then, since you asked the question?
Well, kind of the way that you phrase your answer probably kind of ties in with what Anthony was saying there, with playing to your strengths. With like Martin O'Neill, whenever you had a set piece, or if you had a throw in deep in the opposition box, with the height that our players had, like we were absolute monsters physically in those days. And if you had a set piece, then you would kind of play to your strengths. So I think maybe a Martin O'Neill team, you'd be justified and going for the jugular, throwing it in and see what can throw it into the mixer and see what happens. But whereas with a Postecoglou team or a Brendan Rodgers team, we would play to our strengths. We would retain possession, start a new phase of attack. And that's what works for us. But what works for us might have been a different tactic for like a Martin O'Neill team. So yeah, I think it swings and roundabouts. What you've got, what type of players you've got, what suits them best. So yeah.
Yeah, it's the evolution of football, isn't it? It changes tiki-taka football, all this type of stuff, playing out from the back, and it was different in the O'Neill era. But one thing I wanted to ask us both, and I'll throw it to yourself first, Tony, give Gav a wee moment to think. Who in your lifetime is Celtic's best set piece taker?
I mean,
There's a lot to choose from. There's a lot there, like, isn't there?
yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one I would go with in terms of set plays would be Nakamura, that I've seen personally. I mean, Lubo was fantastic as well, but he wasn't overly prolific with free kicks essentially. But yeah, I would say Naka in terms of free kicks, in terms of deliveries into the box from corners. God's hard to say really, but like I say, it's been that long since we had someone that was so good with it. We went to, funny enough, when we were in the first treble winning year that we had with under Martin O'Neill, Stilian Petrov used to always they used to do the short corner routine in that one. They'd play it to one of the midfielders who'd stop the ball dead, and then the corner kick taker would then flip it in. And more often than not, it was Stilian Petrov that did that, and we scored a lot of goals that way in the treble winning year. But yeah, I think Nakamura would probably come out on top for that one, mate.
Suzuki Nakamura, them 2 free kicks against Manchester United, things of beauty. Gav, a lot of people talking about Alan Thompson. John Collins has mentioned. Lubo as well. I mean, Nakamura was the obvious choice, and that's not to say it's not the right choice, Tony, but it's the first name that comes to people's minds. You talk about free kicks and set pieces, but what about yourself? Are you any different?
Probably not. I think Nakamura, for the fact that he did it twice in the Champions League, twice against Man United at Old Trafford and at Parkhead, to do it on that stage. And even like, remember like the television programs like in Japan where he would like be taken to a moving vehicle with like the car window rolled down, and he would just be taking it and it would go in the window. Just ridiculous skill. And I think it kind of goes back to that Japanese culture where they're masters of their own trade. Alan Thompson, I think the fact that he had a wonderful left foot, and the fact that he did it so many times against Rangers, he's right up there as well. So I would take Nakamura as your number one and Thompson as your number two. But the fact that somebody said John Collins, like in the 90s, John Collins was a brilliant player. Funnily enough, John Collins, his free kicks against Rangers were magnificent. I think he was the first player to score with Predators. And on the note of trivia, you know the Celtic and Rangers or Celtic and Sevco game at Hampden, the League Cup final about 5 years ago. I think it was like yesterday, 5 years ago to the day when Julian scored the goal. Do you know who took that free kick? Do you remember who took that free kick to set up Julian?
Oh,
Christie.
Bang on.
Bastard. Beat again. My granda put a wee shout out for Lee Griffiths. He was good at set pieces as well. When he was on this game. Good delivery of the ball also.
Absolutely.
Good free kick taker. But yeah, fucking quick fire question to get beat again. Thanks for that, Gav. Thanks for the confidence booster before we move on. But yeah, and I got McFarlane come in there before we kind of round off the Hibs game. Might as well do a wee question in. I think I'll find it again. A quick question: will the media bring up the trophy count before the cup final? Your thoughts?
They've kind of had to mention it, but briefly, not in any great detail. I'm sure we'll hear more about it in the build up on Sunday. But I don't think I would probably say they'll not mention it as much. Should we be victorious? But I think they'll cling to anything. Should Rangers fluke their way to winning it? But yeah, to be honest, similar to the all going well, and if Celtic win the title this year, I would really like it if they didn't bring up a big thing, make a big thing about numbers or anything like that, because I think we can all agree that the 55. So obviously we know it's factually incorrect, but the the way they went about celebrating it was, beyond roasting back in the COVID season. So I kind of hope, when we hit 56 as well, that it's another league title. There's nothing specific made about the number, because 56 is not an important number in any way, different when it was 50 or 100 or something like that. But I just I would like us to not go into that, because then it gives off the impression to people that think we are both sides of the same coin, which we know isn't the case. But if we kind of partake in that kind of patter, that finger could be pointed at us. So it's just about the next trophy. And, all going well, we do it this year, obviously, we'll be the only team in Scotland to have done it legally without having shared it with anyone else, and not leaving, of course, the taxpayer or the armed forces out of any pocket either. So, we'll take that rather than, being about any specific number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And Gav, to round off the Hibs game, we talked about James Forrest coming on for Kuhn, played a vital part in the goal, won the ball back, midfield. The ball broke them again. Lovely pass into Kyogo, who kind of dummied it to himself, to his right foot, took it in at speed, and then chipped it over the Hibs goalkeeper. I thought that goal was sublime. And sometimes you look at Kyogo in them situations and think, oh shit, he's going to fluff his lines or he's going to overthink it. But so instinctive, great bit of play, great touch, great chip, and a brilliant way to kill off the game at 3-0.
Yeah, the skill that he showed was very, very pleasing on the eye. The ball from Forrest was slightly in behind him, but the way that he managed to have the presence of mind to kind of lift his foot over, his right foot, his kicking foot, lift it over the ball and reposition it. A lot of strikers would have got muddled up and let the ball get caught between under their legs, which aesthetically looks horrible. But Kyogo had the presence of mind to execute it beautifully. He took the touch perfectly. The keeper rushing out to him. A lot of people would have blasted it at that point. You remember earlier on in the game, I think it was, or was it later on in the game, Adam Ida managed a chance and he just blasted it. That would have been before, because Adam Ida started the game. He blasted it at the keeper. Kyogo's got the presence of mind though. Brilliant touch. And then the keeper rushes out and then he kind of feints and then he dinks it. I'm going to say it was Larsson-esque. I think I'm not saying he's the best player since Larsson up front, but I think he's got the most similar movement to Larsson. For the record, I think Robbie Keane or Craig Bellamy are the two best strikers we've had since Henrik Larsson. But for a lot of people, that doesn't count because we're on loan. They were only half a season. But anyway, Kyogo, fantastic, beautiful. I just wish his numbers were better, but it is what it is. You don't want one particular player getting all the goals. Brendan Rodgers recognised that he wants it distributed amongst the team. So you're not overly dependent on one player. But for that particular goal, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And, he's the man. He's always the main man for Celtic for me. Always the best number 9. I'm happy. I think Aidan McGeady said in the sports scene that Celtic are lucky to have him. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but I think it's just a compliment to the boy's ability. Really, really good player. And I'm glad that he's playing for us. Yeah, I wonder how long we'll have him for. Any of you have any opinions of that? How many more seasons Kyogo stay at Parkhead?
For me, we're Kyogo's last big club or big contract. I don't see him moving on to another European club, because he's 29, coming into his 30s now. I don't know, unless he gets a contract offer elsewhere, maybe in the Bundesliga for a mid-level position team or something like that. But if that would interest him, but I would not hesitate to say that we'll be the biggest club he'll ever play for. In terms of him staying, I believe, I've said this in the podcast chat before, I think this is his last season. I think he'll be away. Really? I think he'll be away in the summer next year. Yeah, there's always talk and rumours about him going back to Japan. There was Red Diamonds were interested in him all for the window, but they couldn't get a deal done. Fasel Kobe are always sniffing about that. And look, obviously, the Japanese culture is very, very loyal, very sentimentality based as well. So you might want to go back and give a couple of years back to the J League. Obviously, they propelled them to biggest heights with Celtic Football Club and that thing. And I wouldn't begrudge him come back. He's been a fantastic player for the club. And there's always the rumours as well that he's not a Brendan Rodgers type striker. Do you know what I mean? So you have to weigh all that up. And I agree with his numbers, but he's what, 15, 16 goals off 100, which is a good return. I think Rodgers always speaks about, Tony, about the team sharing the goals, the midfield players, and I think Alzer Johnson's got 4 or 5 this season, and Liam Scales has weighed in a few. Do you know what I mean? So there's goals all throughout the team, and I'm sure Kyogo's goal, the final one, sent yourself and Judo very happy.
He certainly did, mate. And like we were saying, we were in the Superstore but before the game, and obviously they've got their own, Henrik's got his own kind of designated area at the minute. Obviously he's got his book, and they've got obviously they've done like a new kind of Henrik Larsson, quite simple, the kind of Tiger Woods logo with his initials and making up, it's quite a smart graphic, but you can get that on like kind of, whiskey glasses and all that kind of thing. So aye, the King of Kings has still got his own range at Celtic Park, so kind of just shows you, how much he's still revered. And Gav's spot on. The finish was Larsson-esque. There's no way the other way to describe it. It was an absolutely terrific bit of finish. Not only the wee touch that he takes to get it away from the defender, but then to then get it over the goalkeeper as well. It was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I did say to Jude on the way back, it says that's the kind of thing we used to see every week, But yeah, he's a terrific player, and you might well be right. This, he obviously wasn't signed by Brendan, but he's more than delivered for Brendan. And if that comes to the point where I think we would have to need to see if Kyogo was to leave, we'd need to use whatever we got to try and bring someone in to replace him, because his movement, his goals, his contribution to Celtic has been, absolutely phenomenal since Ange brought him in. He's repaid that transfer fee several times over, and it's been a privilege to watch him play. I'll be gutted when he does go. Hopefully, it's not quite this, so maybe we get another year out of him or not. But that's for the guys in the technical area that know far more about football than me to decide. But like you say, there might come to the point where it's about going back and doing something with the J League as well. But yeah, I'd love to see him stick around for a little while yet. It just bugs me that he wears the number 8, because I think he would be.
I like that. I love that about him.
I suppose in a way it's because he's not getting that same constant comparison. But like you say, he's got the most kind of similar kind of movement to Henrik, as Gav says. So yeah, he would be more than worthy wearing the number 7 in my book. But I love him to bits, and I hope he's here for as long as he wants. Freedom of the city. And
let's be fair. I mean, that number 7 jersey since Henrik Larsson left has been somewhat cursed. So I'm glad he's not wearing it. Most players who've worn it since.
We've had a few belters that have worn it. Let's be honest.
Yeah, 100%. And Jed put a comment in, Gav, that Smell the Club wants us to have a brief chat about. It's only Celtic supporters who do this, put hypothetical situations in there, but it's quite fun and interesting, I suppose, to get people's opinions. Jed was saying, if we had a choice between winning tomorrow or the League Cup final on Sunday, so you have to lose one and win one, what way round would you do it?
Well, the thing is, if you lose the League Cup final, then the conclusion is that the Huns win that particular trophy. But if we win tomorrow night, what's the end result though? Do we qualify for the next round of the Champions League? So I get that. I have a bit of a distaste for hypotheticals here whenever I don't know what the end result is here. So we beat
We'll put our own wee spin on it. Let's say we win against Zagreb tomorrow. That's us qualified. That's the stipulation for that tie. And then obviously the League Cup final, if we win that, we'll win the trophy. That goes without saying. But you know what I mean? There's the stipulations.
Okay. If we get through to the next round of the Champions League, then begrudgingly, yes, I would take the former. I would beat the European team and lose against the Huns. Yeah.
That's a tough one. What about you, Tony?
What would you do? Like strength, just like maintain domestic dominance against the most meaningless of the 3 trophies, and another European year without graduating to the next level.
Well, I mean, the way I'm looking at it
sorry,
is,
Stephen, you go.
oh, sorry, Tony. The way I'm looking at it is, hypothetically, if I chose to lose the game tomorrow against Zagreb, then we're more than likely going to win against Young Boys. So that would probably see us through and see us through on points. I couldn't live with myself if I chose to let them beat us. It's just within me. I can't stand any part of them, and I couldn't stand headlines like they're back. Clementine is a tactical genius and all this pish. Fucking get that in the bin. I want us to beat them every single day of the week, every night, twice on a Sunday. Bury them. They should be buried, but you know what I'm saying. Oh, they irritate every fibre in my body. That's the way I look at it. But Tony, what about yourself? It is a hypothetical, so give it to me.
Even without the hypothetical, mate, there's if I'm picking one game, it's the League Cup final every day of the week. And I'll be honest, I'm picking the League Cup final whether we were playing Glasgow Rangers or Berwick Rangers. I quite like seeing Celtic win trophies. Do you know what I mean? I totally take the European argument, and we should broaden our horizons and all that thing. And it's all valid points. And you'd say definitely by how we've been performing so far this season, the great compliment we can give the teams, we've gave ourselves a chance to qualify. I think I can't see us doing it through the top 8 now, regardless of whether we win tomorrow or not, because I think there's too many of the other teams that are kind of sort of running away with it. But we would have, before the draw was made, if we were to say that we would get a playoff spot, we would all have absolutely seen that as progress in any case. And the fact that we've picked up points away from home to the Europa League winners, we've had a fantastic win against Leipzig, and that's something that we hope to build on. But at the end of the day, it's the most meaningless of the 3 trophies, or less meaningful. But you can't win. You can't have domestic trebles or clean sweeps or anything like that without winning it. And there's if somebody said to me right now, you'll have a Dortmund-like game tomorrow night, but you'll win the cup on Sunday, I would take it. I would take getting beat 10-1 tomorrow night if it meant winning the cup on Sunday. That's what winning trophies, especially against them, means for me.
Yeah, 100%. It's just quite funny. It's only Celtic fans that put up these hypothetical situations. What would you do this? Would you do that? Would you do that?
We wouldn't mind a wee victory on both.
Aye, of course. And moving on to the Dinamo Zagreb game, Gav, a very interesting character has peeked his head above the parapet. Mark Viduka is going to be in attendance tomorrow evening over in Croatia, I believe, and very bizarrely, I thought anyway. By the way, you can fill me in. My knowledge of Mark Viduka here is very limited in terms of his time at Celtic, but it ended rather sourly, I believe, and I've heard how he walked out in half time against Cali Thistle and things like that. But he was talking up his time at Celtic like it was the best time of his life. Like he played his best football. He was the top goal scorer in the league. He was referencing and the supporters, which is great. It's good to hear all them accolades. But I mean, he came out and was saying that he reckons because Dinamo Zagreb are at home, they're the favourites. The media, I think Big Dom was in as well, saying that the media are trying to portray that Zagreb are going to be weaker because they've lost 3 or 4 key players. But we know this in the past. Usually that means they're going to bring in 2 or 3 other superstars from wherever it may be, and they're just as good as they were. So you can kind of put that to one side. I think Dinamo Zagreb's form in the Champions League is a bit like ours, I believe. I think they're on 7 or 8 points. Started reasonably well. They got a humping of Bayern Munich, but they've done well since. A bit like ourselves at Dortmund. But just about Mark Viduka, Gav, coming into the woodwork for this game. What's your memories of him? Do you think he was right in what he'd done? And then obviously also leading into the Zagreb game, how are you feeling about that?
Well, it is the Mark Viduka derby. Anthony, am I right in saying that Prozinecki played for that team as well against Celtic?
Yes, I believe so. Or he's definitely played at Celtic Park.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always remember because they were Croatia Zagreb back in the 90s, and it was my first champion. Obviously, we'd won the league in '98, and that was still at the time. If you won the Scottish League, you still had to play a playoff round, and I'm pretty sure it was Darren Jackson scored the winning goal. So we went over into the second leg, a goal up, and 10 years old, you're thinking, I'm going to see Celtic in the Champions League, and then Zagreb had other ideas that night. I think it was 3 or 4. They really gave us a proper doing. But yeah, and then I think we went and signed Martin Viduka, or Marko Viduka, as some of the guys have been saying in the comments. There, Marko Viduka on the back of it. But in the generations before, there was kind of more awareness about mental health and things like that. I think by all accounts he signed for Celtic, and then he very quickly flew back to his native Australia, and you didn't see hiding or hairy him for a good few months, and it was he talks about it since then. It was like he was totally overwhelmed at signing for Celtic, and just all that pressure. And obviously back then, the media made a joke about it, and here we go again, another Celtic signing, another flake sort of thing. But once he came back and got settled into the team, he's quite quickly seen what a player he was. And I think one of the biggest regrets ever, not being, of course, Henrik breaking his leg was heartbreaking, in so many ways. But that particular season, he had started off, him and Henrik were scoring hat-tricks. They were sharing hat-tricks between them. I think there was one particular game against Aberdeen, just a week or two before Henrik broke his leg. We beat them 7-0 at Parkhead. One scored 4, the other scored 3, but the other player had set up 2 of each other's goals. It was the 2 of them together looked like they were going to be absolutely unbelievable. And then obviously Henrik broke his leg, and Viduka kind of had to carry the team for a while, and for large parts he did. But it'll always be kind of soured with the events of the Inverness Cali game, and he basically he effectively downed tools. And when John Barnes was sacked and Kenny Dalglish came in, he did kind of raise his game for the rest of the season. We beat Aberdeen in the League Cup final that year, and he played well, and he did actually score quite a few goals against Rangers, but they always ended up in draws or kind of narrow defeats. So he's not kind of lauded in the same. But in terms of natural ability, he's up there with any striker I've seen at Celtic Park. His first touch, and he's like technically he was unbelievable. But it just so happened, I think there was too much water under the bridge, that by the time Martin came in that summer, he'd already made up his mind that he wanted to leave. And it was a move that suited both parties, to be fair. We got 7 million for him, I believe, something like that, from Leeds United, who were flying at the time. They were, potential, they were a top 4 Premier League side, and they had massive ambitions. And, they got to the semi-final of the Champions League that year, and he showed how good a player he was in that team. But with the 7 million, we spent 6 of that bringing Chris Sutton in. So, it's one of those sliding door moments, but a terrific player. And as you say, since then, he's only ever had good things to say about his time at Celtic. And I think, he's not been back too often, but when he does, he always gets a decent reception when he's doing the Paradise Windfall or whatever. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see who he'll be cheering for tomorrow night. But yeah, here's hoping that it goes better in Zagreb this time than what he did, than what happened back in 1999 when our hearts were broken that we weren't going to be playing in the Champions League. But I think it's going to be a right tight game, like you say, Stephen. They've started well as well. I think they're only a point behind us, and yeah, it's going to be a right tough one. But I think we've seen enough from the Atalanta game that, and even the way that we kind of dug deep to get our point against Bruges, even though that was at home, we've seen enough of this team this season to know that we've got a bit of character. And hopefully we can get out there. If somebody offered me a point now, yeah, I'd probably take it. But thing is, under Brendan, we're always going to just go for the win. So yeah, it would be absolutely brilliant if we could come back on the plane with some kind of result.
Do you know the mad thing is? All that came from Gav asking me was a certain player playing in a game. No.
Somebody put the Benson in
it. Anthony had a great recollection of like the transfer saga, the delayed kind of arrival at Parkhead. So I couldn't interrupt him because he was saying a lot of facts, at that point. But, see, in terms of like ability, Mark Viduka was right up there. The fact that he could, there was a particular I'm talking about once he left Celtic to go to England. But there's if you ever watch like Sky Sports and they do the throwback games, there's that game between Leeds and Liverpool. I can't remember if it was 4-3 to Liverpool or 4-3 to Leeds, but Viduka got a hat-trick, I'm sure, against Liverpool. And if you're talking about Brendan Rodgers and how he likes certain characteristics of a player, Viduka had everything, maybe apart from pace, but his first touch, brilliant physicality, the way he could roll a player, and his finishing was brilliant. So calm under pressure. He was such a good striker. And it's, see, whenever you think of like Celtic at the kind of the mid-90s, turn of the century, early 21st century, some of the strikers that we had outside Larsson, Hearts and Sutton, Van Hooijdonk, somebody said that Van Hooijdonk was a fantastic player, but Viduka was right up there. And he was one of those Celtic players who left Scotland, went down to England, and he showed he could do it for one of the top teams, kind of like the way that Di Canio came to Celtic and then after a year went down and he earned a lot of plaudits. Viduka undoubtedly earned his main money in football in England, but it was that move to Scotland which kind of like, convinced people to take him down south. Brilliant player, and I wish we had him for longer. But as people rightfully said in the comments, his attitude was stinking. Maybe if we had a stronger manager at the helm and less division between the manager and the top tier of the Celtic board, director of football, etc. Maybe if there was a stronger structure, then he wouldn't have kind of thrown the dummy at the pram. But brilliant player on his day. Aye. And I'm just kind of glad that we got to see him, as Anthony was talking about, going to games with Jude, and he can see Kyogo, play for Celtic, just those particular moments. I think it's really, really important. I was thinking back to when I was a Celtic fan going to the games with my dad in the early 90s, and the player that I looked up to was like Jerry Craney, and if you compare him to who we've got now, he doesn't really kind of compare. But I think it's always important to have heroes, especially as a young Celtic fan, and like to kind of capture that imagination, to kind of capture the magic, and like that's your heroes and that's who you enjoy seeing, the proper talent on the field. We might not have had it in the early 90s, but in the mid-90s, from Van Hooijdonk, Viduka, and to Henrik, we certainly had it, and up to Kyogo nowadays. It's really, really important for especially young fans to kind of to have that. Viduka, brilliant player. But anyway, looking forward to this game. I don't know what's going to happen. I hear that they've had a right bad time of it. No wins in 5 in all competitions. No wins in 5 home games since the end of September, and no wins in their latest 4 home Champions League games.
But you know what that usually means? We go there and get spanked. All that goes out the window.
I know. No, I know that they've beaten Artmedia Bratislava, the team that we fucked, and the other team, Red Bull Salzburg, away from home. I think they beat them too. I think. So that's two away Champions League games. Now, we've not done that since 2017, so let's not get carried away. If this mob can do it, then let's not take them. Let's not underestimate them. They're obviously a half decent team. They're on 7 points right now, more than some heavyweights in Europe. So let's not get carried away with the narrative of their bad run of form, their injuries as well. Apparently, their manager said that they've only got 14 fit players. Don't believe that for a second. But to get an away win in the Champions League would be massive. It would really just take a wee bit of pressure off the remaining couple of games. So what I wouldn't give, well, as I said earlier on, I would maybe sacrifice the cup final for a win tomorrow night. Maybe I never digested that question too much. Maybe I'd have a more measured response now. But this is a massive game. I would love to get 3 points, but the main thing is we don't lose. Let's not come away with a defeat. Fucking massive, and I'm looking forward to it. It's an early kick-off, isn't it? We don't really have many of them. 5:45, so really looking forward to it, mate.
I do want to say, I hope the fans who travelled out are safe and well, because there's been reports of incidents over in Croatia at this precise moment in time. So hope anyone who's travelled is safe and well, and looking forward to the game tomorrow. But one person I used to hate, not hate's a strong word, but you understand what I mean in a minute, Tony, on European nights, the build-up especially, was Charlie Nicholas. Charlie Nicholas used to give Celtic an awful, awful hard time. Anytime I listened to him, the same with that other idiot, Andy Walker. That's quite funny now. None of them are very rarely near Celtic games at this precise moment in time. But P. O'Neill was, I think it's only Fergus was spoke about Faduga. P. O'Neill's in the comments talking about Charlie Nicholas as well, in a good way. Other people are saying other things about him. But he was out recently on a podcast, I think, in the warm up with Gordon Duncan, talking about Celtic and playing for Celtic, that it was such an iconic jersey. He loved it, all that type of stuff, and obviously he moved to Arsenal, things like that. But do these players kind of? I mean, I understand their job in a way is obviously to call out what they see, but is there a case of some ex-players or some ex-people associated with Celtic that go way over it and just become almost for supporters like, the fuck, you used to play for us and you're getting on like that? That type of stuff. You kind of get defensive and you kind of be like, you play for Celtic, what are you doing? But Charlie Nicholas, for me, when I was growing up, I used to hate hearing him talk about Celtic because there was never anything positive to say about them. I think he even talked about it in the podcast he was on. He never really goes back because he doesn't feel welcome. I mean, do you blame us? Or is that just us overreacting to a pundit's job?
Yeah, I mean, I think Charlie, he obviously got the gig at the time when, punditry was a kind of different game back then to what it is now. Listen, I've not heard the podcast in context, so I'm not quite not quite sure necessarily how it's came across. Listen, there's like every kind of commentator, I must admit that there's stuff he reads that he writes that I agreed with, and there's other stuff I thought he went over the top. I think there was one of the times when he was sort of kind of make it. It was an article. It always reminds me of when it was Neil Lennon's first tenure at the club, and he was making noise. I don't know if it was about a transfer rumour or stuff that he was hearing from the inside or something along those lines. And Neil Lennon made the point that he says, he'd been there for 10 years at that point as a player and a manager, and he says, with the greatest respect, I've not seen Charlie come through the front door. He says he's not going to be somebody. Obviously, he might know the odd person, but he's not going to have those kind of deep inline contacts that the other ex-players maybe you would think maybe nowadays. A Chris Sutton will have contacts at Celtic, for example. But yeah, I mean, obviously he was. I was too young to see him play, but you talk to anyone of that generation, he was absolutely phenomenal. And he chose. He went to Arsenal, which maybe wasn't the best move at the time. I think obviously he liked the idea, the bright lights of London, but talking to guys for the generations, they say that he could have played for Liverpool and he probably should have went to Liverpool because he probably would have been more. His name would have been more famous as a footballer. He would have won more, titles and played more in Europe if he'd went to Liverpool. But yeah, I mean, I think all of these pundits, they like to come away with kind of shock jock comments, and yeah, I think there's some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. But I would probably say Chris Commons' stuff winds me up a lot more than Charlie's ever did. To be fair, but
he's disappeared, hasn't he? Chris Commons has disappeared.
Yeah,
he's just dropped off the face of it.
I always struggle to kind of really associate it. I think it's quite strange how you can be so engrossed in the Celtic way and be so loved by the supporters the way you were, but then take a wage off the Daily Mail. That never kind of sat too right with me. But hey, guys got to eat, I suppose. But yeah, punditries, it's a shock jock type of thing, isn't it? They'll say things sometimes just to get a reaction, but I don't think he's the worst, but he's certainly not the best pundit that you'll ever hear. Champagne Charlie.
Yeah, and Gav, I know it's a random one, but I just thought it was appropriate to bring up. We spoke about a lot of random topics, Mark Faduga, that type of thing tonight. So, Charlie Nicholas, where do you stand on him?
I kind of let other Celtic fans do the talking on Charlie Nicholas, people who watched him play and then they've been there whenever he first turned up under. Yeah, I think whenever I listen to Charlie Nicholas talk about Celtic, it kind of makes me think of Chris Sutton, who, for a lot of Chris Sutton's work, he does work in the English media as well as in the Scottish media. And Chris Sutton, to a fault, he always sticks up for Celtic. Like, he will criticise us on occasions. I think at one point He even criticised Neil Lennon in the COVID year, which took a lot from Chris Sutton, who's a friend and an ex-colleague of Neil Lennon. Chris Sutton does a hell of a lot of work for talking up the Scottish game and Celtic, even to the derision of a lot of his English colleagues. Charlie Nicholas, I don't remember him ever really doing that. I think Charlie Nicholas is out maybe for himself rather than out to kind of represent Celtic in a good light. But neither do have any hatred. Neither do have any kind of hatred for, maybe hatred is a strong word, but, you know, if they criticise Celtic, take it with a pinch of salt. Same with Andy Walker to an extent. I think Andy Walker, whenever he started making headway in the media, he was on TV to start with, and then obviously like newspaper columns and stuff like that, and as a commentator. I think, I don't know, is it because that you're a former Celtic player that you are more determined than a former Rangers professional, more determined to appear impartial? Is that kind of an unconscious bias, almost like when you're determined to kind of prove people that you're neither pro-Celtic or against Celtic? Maybe that's in the back of their mind. I don't know what it is. I'm not trying to make excuses, but either way, whenever they talk about Celtic, yeah, they don't really sound endearing to the club. I like Chris Sutton. I know that he's a Marmite character and he winds up a lot of the Hun fans, but I like that. I think it's just good entertainment. Charlie Nicholas and Andy Walker, whether they're right or wrong, I just don't find them particularly insightful. And I think the way that you present yourself as well, the way that Chris Sutton does, he's just got a lot of charisma. Charlie Nicholas and Andy Walker, they just seem like boring guys. I don't have any ill will towards them, but you know, if they were to write a column online, or if they were to be talking about something in the media, I would just probably switch off. And maybe that's just from years and years and years of me just getting bored of what they've got to say.
Yeah. And in a world of weird things, it turns out that Chris Sutton and Chris Boyd are best mates. You know, you never know these things, but obviously TV cameras tell you a different story. But I actually did watch the podcast they done with the warm-up again, Gordon Duncan and Sam North. It was actually really good. If anyone wants to listen to it, really funny, really insightful about the rivalry and things like that. What Sky TV portrays to the wider audience is quite funny. But yeah, look, we'll kind of round off tonight, Tony. Big game tomorrow, 5:45 away from home. If we win, we're probably hopefully guaranteed, touch wood, European football after Christmas. What would be your lineup prediction firstly and your score prediction?
So back four, I'm assuming everybody's fit. It'll be Schmeichel and goals. Taylor, I think, with trusty CCV and Alistair Johnston, Callum McGregor, obviously. I think Paulo Bernardo will come in, and Rio Hatate will be your other player in the midfield three, and then a front three of Kuhn, Maeda and Kyogo. I think that'll be the team that will start. And fingers crossed it's another memorable night, and I'll go for 2-1 Celtic.
Yeah, and see as well, even to prove how vital that away draw was against Atalanta. See, since that, they've been on this unbelievable winning run, scoring goals left, right and centre. I think they're top of the Italian league as well, so it just shows you how good a performance we give over in Italy, and hopefully that performance comes tomorrow, but with a win, Gav. You could say Zagreb or weaker opposition. We don't know this. They've had a similar start to ourselves. But get into the game, are you confident? What would your lineup be? And like I asked Tony, your score prediction?
In terms of confidence, a quiet confidence. I genuinely don't know what type of team Zagreb are. They might have the majority possession, but I think I would agree with Anthony to start with Greg Taylor. I would just go for experience for this one. I don't know how the game will unfold. Thing is, you play to your strengths, I think. And for this particular game, I think Greg Taylor is our strength in terms of his experience. So Schmeichel, Greg Taylor, Trusty, Vickers, Johnson in the midfield, Hatate, McGregor. Is it Engels or Bernardo? Bernardo, Calmac. Anthony, who was your midfield? Did you go for Engels or Bernardo?
I went Bernardo, McGregor, and Hatate.
Right, okay. Well, I'm mirroring you here so far. And up front, Kuhn, Kyogo, and Maida.
Score prediction?
3-2. It's never going to happen, but I would like a 3-2.
That would be an entertaining game. Hearts in the mouth type stuff. But for myself, I would go Schmeichel, AJ, Carter Vickers, Trusty, Greg Taylor, McGregor, Hatate, Bernardo. I'll agree with that. I think Bernardo will come in. He'll be fresh. Engels has played a lot of games recently. No slide on him, by the way. Sometimes you just need to use that rotation word. Kuhn, Kyogo, Maeda, and I will go a 2-1 victory to Celtic. And obviously, as well, that rounds off the podcast. We will be back for definite on Friday night because I'm hosting it. So we'll be on. We don't know who's on yet, but we will be back on. Looking forward to the League Cup final against Sevco and hopefully talking about a good result away from home in Croatia against Zagreb. But lads, that rounds it up. Have you enjoyed it?
Loved it, mate. Great being back on. Good to kind of mixing up the who's on a Monday night as well. It's great to have you both on. So yeah, great chat, and here's hoping for a good week for the boys as well.
And Gav, you've been on the beer tonight. A couple have been downed already during the podcast. Have you enjoyed it?
I am on my second beer, and I've only drank that much. I've still got the majority of it left. Look, I'm not working tomorrow, so not that it would make a difference anyways, you know. But I really good. Enjoyed tonight. I'm looking forward to the game tomorrow. All is well. Good to see you guys. No seen you in a Monday for ages. Aye.
Yeah.
McGinn to be pissed off that we went past the hour mark, you know, because I know that's his milestone. He gets OCB if he goes past the 1 hour mark. So I'm glad that we're on an hour and 22.
Well, we've done well tonight. It's been a good podcast, and everyone watching along. But look, we do appreciate the patience. I told you at the start, we're sick of the schedule, but hopefully after Christmas, once things die down, we'll be back fully flying as normal. But until Friday, stay well, keep safe. Hail, hail.